You are being asked to believe that the United States is back in the driver's seat. You are being told that by bringing Venezuelan oil back online, we have secured our energy future, isolated our enemies, and proven that American sanctions still dictate the rules of the global game. That is a comfortable lie. The reality is that we are not flexing muscle. We are scrambling to patch a leak. We are watching the structural decay of the very systems that kept America dominant for half a century. The petrodollar is fracturing. Our sanctions are losing their teeth. And the political volatility coming out of Washington isn't making us feared. It is making us irrelevant. We are entering a period where the rest of the world is actively building a future without us, and the cost of our denial is going to be measured in decades of economic pain. I am not here to give you the press release. I am here to walk you through the trajectory of a decline that is already in motion, and to show you why it cannot be reversed by bluster or force. My name is Hiroshi Takamura. If you are tired of the comforting myths and you are ready to face the hard strategic reality of what comes next for this country, make the choice to subscribe right now. Let's look at the truth. If you look at the headlines, if you skim the surface of the analysis coming out of Washington right now, you are being invited to believe a very specific, very comforting story. It goes something like this. The United States, through the sheer weight of its economic sanctions and the strategic dexterity of its diplomats, has once again brought a rogue state to heel. We are told that Venezuela is back in the fold. We are told that the vast, heavy crude reserves of the Orinoco Belt are coming back online to stabilize global prices, to replace Russian barrels, and to secure American energy independence. It feels familiar, doesn't it? It feels like the old world order. It relies on a logic we all grew up with, that oil equals power, that the dollar follows the oil, and that ultimately the United States sets the tempo for global energy. It is a narrative of dominance. It suggests that we can turn the pressure on, starve a regime, and then, when it suits our strategic needs, turn the pressure off and watch the oil flow exactly where we want it to go. This is a seductive story. It tells us that the levers of American power still work the way they did 20 years ago. It tells us that we are still the drivers of geopolitical gravity. But I need you to look closer. I need you to strip away the press releases and the victory laps and look at the physical, economic reality on the ground. Because if you do, that story of dominance dissolves. What you see underneath is not a superpower flexing its muscle. What you see is a superpower scrambling to patch a leak. Let's start with the physical reality. The assumption is that Venezuela is a tap that can simply be turned back on. That is a fantasy. The Venezuelan oil industry is not in hibernation, it is in ruins. We are not talking about a pause in production. We are talking about decades of systemic looting, mismanagement, and physical decay. The infrastructure required to extract, transport, and refine that heavy crude has been cannibalized. The technical expertise, the engineers, the geologists, the project managers fled the country years ago. You cannot sanction a country into the Stone Age and then expect it to perform like a modern industrial partner overnight. To bring Venezuela back to even a fraction of its former capacity would require tens of billions of dollars in capital investment and years of sustained, stable effort. And who is going to pay for that? This brings us to the second crack in the facade, the corporate reality. Washington likes to pretend that American energy giants are chomping at the bit to get back into Venezuela. They want you to believe that companies like Chevron are leading the charge, eager to reclaim their assets. But look at the terms. Look at the hesitation. These corporations are not rushing in with open checkbooks. They are moving with extreme, calculated caution. They are demanding special licenses, specific legal immunities, and guarantees that they can recoup their debts before they invest a single new dollar. This is not the behavior of an industry looking at a gold rush. This is the behavior of an industry looking at a crime scene. They know that the legal environment in Venezuela is non-existent. They know that the political stability is a mirage. They are participating only to the extent that they can recover what they already lost. They are not building the future. They are salvaging the past. So if the infrastructure is broken and the corporations are terrified, why is the United States government pushing this narrative so hard? Why are we suddenly willing to overlook the authoritarian nature of the regime, the human rights abuses, and the corruption we spent years condemning? This is the hardest truth to swallow. We are not doing this because we are strong. We are doing this because we are anxious. The global energy map has shifted against us. We are looking at a world where our traditional levers are jamming. We cut off Russian oil, thinking we could isolate Moscow, but the oil found new markets in India and China. We looked to the Saudis to pump more, to lower prices for the American consumer, and they ignored us. They cut production to protect their own revenue. The return to Venezuela is not a strategic offensive. It is a defensive scramble. We are reaching for the dirtiest, heaviest, most difficult to refine crude in the hemisphere because the easy options are gone. We are negotiating with Caracas not because we have conquered them, but because we need them to plug a gap in our own energy security. This is the definition of a false victory. We are celebrating the return of American leverage, but in reality, we are revealing the limits of our influence. We are showing the world that our sanctions regime is porous, that our moral red lines are flexible when the gas price ticks up, and that our ability to command global energy markets is fading. When you see a superpower forced to rehabilitate a pariah state just to keep the lights on and the inflation numbers down, you are not watching a masterclass in diplomacy. You are watching a system that is under profound stress. You are watching a country that is used to dictating the rules, suddenly realizing that the game is being played without it. This is not control. It is the illusion of control. And the longer we pretend that this is a victory, the more blind we become to the real crisis that is unfolding, not in the oil fields of Venezuela, but in the financial plumbing of the world itself. We think we are fixing the problem. In reality, we are just exposing how vulnerable we have become. To understand why the illusion of control matters, you have to understand what it is actually hiding. It is hiding the decay of the single most important asset the United States possesses. I am not talking about aircraft carriers, and I am not talking about crude oil reserves. I am talking about the structural dominance of the U.S. dollar. For 50 years, we have lived inside a very specific economic reality, one that we often call the petrodollar. But that word has become a slogan, a bumper sticker that people use without really understanding the mechanics. We need to reconstruct what that system actually was, because only then can you see how fast it is unraveling. The petrodollar was never just about pricing oil in greenbacks. That was the surface. Underneath, it was a sophisticated, closed loop of trust and recycling. The arrangement was elegant, The world needed oil, and to buy oil they needed dollars. So, nations exported goods to the United States to earn those dollars. They paid the oil producers, and then, and this is the critical part, the oil producers took those billions of dollars and poured them right back into the United States. They bought U.S. Treasury bonds. They bought American weapons. They bought American real estate. It was a perfect engine. It ensured that no matter how much we spent, the money always came home. It allowed us to run deficits that would bankrupt any other nation. It kept our interest rates low and our influence absolute. It wasn't just a currency. It was the operating system of the global economy. That operating system is crashing. The loop is broken. The automatic recycling of energy profits into American debt is no longer a guarantee. It is a memory. We are watching the rise of a parallel financial architecture, one built specifically to bypass the United States. Look at the deals being signed today. We see major energy exporters accepting yuan. We see bilateral trade agreements settled in rupees or gold. We see digital currency bridges that allow central banks to settle accounts without ever touching a U.S. clearing bank. This is not happening in the shadows anymore. It is happening in press releases. This is where the Venezuela delusion becomes so dangerous. The strategists in Washington seem to believe that if we can just get Venezuelan oil flowing toward the Gulf Coast again, we can reboot the machine. They think that by capturing the resource, we recapture the financial hegemony. They are wrong. They are mistaking the fuel for the engine. You can force Venezuela to sell us oil, but you cannot force the global market to treat that transaction the way it did in 1990. The financial plumbing has changed. Venezuela is already deeply entangled with creditors in Beijing and Moscow. The revenue generated from that oil is not destined for U.S. Treasury bonds. It is destined to service debts in currencies that are not our own. The flow of oil might physically return to the West, but the flow of value, the financial dominance, does not automatically follow. We are seeing a fundamental decoupling. Energy trade is separating from dollar settlement, and every time we use the dollar as a weapon, every time we sanction a central bank or freeze assets to achieve a short-term political win, we accelerate this process. We tell the rest of the world that the dollar is not a neutral utility, but a political leash. And rational actors, even our allies, are quietly looking for ways to cut that leash. This is the hard reality that no one in power wants to admit. The petrodollar is not under attack. It is simply being outgrown. The global economy is becoming too complex, too multipolar, and too wary of American unpredictability to rely on a single point of failure. We are trying to resurrect a monopoly in a market that has already moved on. We are fighting to control the barrels, thinking it will give us control of the ledger. But the ledger is being rewritten in languages we do not speak, on platforms we do not control. And no amount of heavy crude from the Orinoco Belt can reverse that trajectory. This brings us to the most volatile variable in the equation. We cannot honestly discuss the erosion of American leverage without confronting the specific political acid that has accelerated it. I am not talking about a political party, and I am not interested in the personality of a former president. I am talking about Trumpism as a strategic method. We need to separate the United States as a long-term institutional project from the chaotic transactional approach that has hijacked its foreign policy. For generations, American power relied on a simple, boring currency, predictability. Whether you loved us or hated us, you knew the United States was the anchor. We built institutions, we maintained alliances, and we honored the architecture of the global economy because that architecture was built to serve us. Trumpism rejects this continuity. It replaces strategy with impulse. It treats the presidency not as the stewardship of an empire, but as the management of a family business. It views foreign policy through a lens of immediate, short-term transaction. What can you give me right now? If the answer is nothing, the deal is off. This approach feels visceral. To a frustrated electorate, it looks like toughness. It looks like we are finally throwing our weight around. But in the world of high-stakes energy and finance, this is not strength. It is strategic sabotage. Look at Venezuela. The maximum pressure campaign was the perfect embodiment of this failure. It was aggressive, it was loud, and it was entirely improvisational. We sanctioned the oil, we recognized a shadow government, and we demanded capitulation. But there was no endgame. There was no institutional follow-through. When the immediate collapse didn't happen, the attention span drifted, and the policy rotted on the vine. We didn't change the regime, we just broke the plumbing. We created a vacuum that allowed Russia and China to step in and secure assets at pennies on the dollar. We took a sphere of influence and turned it into a distress sale for our rivals. But the damage goes far beyond Caracas. The real cost of Trumpism is the signal it sends to the rest of the world. When you treat alliances like protection rackets, when you tear up trade deals on a whim, and when you weaponize the dollar to settle personal or partisan scores, you are not projecting power. You are exporting volatility. Markets crave stability. Energy flows require years of lead time and certainty. When the United States becomes the primary source of global unpredictability, rational actors, even our closest allies, start to hedge their bets. They have to. They cannot build their national security on the mood swings of a Washington that might reverse course every 4 years. We are seeing the result of this erraticism right now. Europe is quietly developing mechanisms to bypass U.S. sanctions. The Gulf states are refusing to take our calls when we ask for production hikes. They are looking at the United States and seeing a partner that is politically schizophrenic. Trumpism claims to be America first. But by stripping away the institutional trust that binds the global system to Washington, it creates an America alone. It pushes the world to build firewalls against us. It incentivizes every major power to develop alternative payment systems, alternative supply chains, and alternative alliances that are insulated from American chaos. This is the tragic irony. The movement that screams the loudest about American strength is the very thing that is hollowing it out. Trumpism is not a counterforce to the fragmentation of the global order. It is the accelerant. It weakens American power even when it claims to defend it, because it forces the rest of the world to realize that the United States can no longer be trusted to hold the roof up. We have arrived at the point of no return. This is where we have to stop dealing in hopeful rhetoric and start dealing in cold, hard, structural mathematics. The question is no longer whether we can reverse this trend. The question is whether we are capable of surviving it. We need to understand that this trajectory, the move away from the dollar, the fracturing of global energy markets, the insulation against American influence, is not a phase. It is not a diplomatic mood swing that will pass when a new administration takes office. It is a rational, irreversible response to the environment we created. Think about it from the perspective of a finance minister in Brazil, or South Africa, or Indonesia. You look at the United States, and you see a country that uses its currency as a blunt instrument of foreign policy. You see a country that swings wildly between engagement and isolationism every 4 years. You see a debt load that is mathematically unsustainable. If you are that finance minister, you do not need to be an enemy of the United States to want a backup plan. You just need to be responsible. You are legally obligated to diversify. You are building parallel payment rails, securing non-dollar credit lines, and hoarding gold not because you want to destroy America, but because you cannot afford to go down with the ship if America hits an iceberg. This momentum is already locked in. The parallel systems are not just drawings on a whiteboard. They are being code-tested. The relationships between energy producers and Asian markets are being solidified with pipelines and long-term contracts that last for decades. So, what happens when this process matures? What is the price tag for the United States? It is not an overnight collapse. It is a slow, agonizing suffocation of our options. First, our sanctions stop working. We are already seeing this. When we try to punish a rogue state in the future, we will reach for the financial off switch, and we will find that the wiring has been rerouted. The target will simply shift to the alternative network we incentivized them to build. We will shout, and the world will shrug. Second, and far more dangerously, the cost of being American goes up. For half a century, we have enjoyed the exorbitant privilege of printing the world's reserve currency. It meant we could borrow cheaply. It meant the world subsidized our standard of living. As that demand for dollars softens, as central banks hold fewer treasuries, the interest rates on our massive national debt will climb. The margin for error in our domestic economy shrinks. We will face fiscal constraints we have never had to imagine before. Third, we lose the agenda. When you control the energy flow and the money flow, you decide what the world talks about. You decide the priorities. When you lose that control, you become just another voice at the table, shouting louder perhaps, but commanded less respect. The tragedy here is that our current reaction is making it worse. We are reacting to this loss of control with more coercion. We are doubling down on the very tactics that are driving our partners away. It is a feedback loop. We feel our power slipping, so we squeeze harder. The world feels the squeeze, so they build the exits faster. We are trapping ourselves in a shrinking room. The window for strategic adaptation is closing. The real challenge for the United States right now is not how to force Venezuela to obey, or how to bully the Saudis, or how to outlaw the use of the yuan. The challenge is psychological. We have to accept that the era of unipolar dominance is over. It is not coming back. The choice we face is stark. We can continue to rage against the dying of the light, flailing with sanctions and threats, accelerating our own isolation. Or we can do the hard work of adaptation. We can compete. We can fix our own economy. We can offer the world a system that people want to join, rather than one they are forced to use. But that requires a level of maturity and discipline that Washington has not shown in a long time. If we continue to mistake coercion for control, if we continue to believe that we can dictate terms to a world that has already started moving on, we will wake up one day to find that we are the ones who have been sanctioned. We will be the ones left on the outside, holding a currency that buys less, commanding a military that can't afford to deploy, and shouting orders that no one listens to. The trajectory is set. The descent has begun. The only question left is whether we pull up or whether we ride the illusion of power all the way into the ground.